There is a room in your house that you walk into at least 3 times a day without ever once thinking of it as dangerous. You don't lock it. You don't wear gloves in it. You let your children play on the floor of it. You store your medicine there, sometimes without even meaning to. And yet, if I told you that inside that room, right now, sitting in a cabinet, a drawer, or your refrigerator, there are at least a dozen things capable of quietly damaging two of the hardest working organs in your body, organs that filter roughly 50 gallons of blood every single day, would you believe me? That room is your kitchen. Think about your own kitchen for a second. The counter you prep food on. The drawer where the takeout menus and the painkillers somehow ended up in the same place. The fridge door lined with drinks you grab without reading. The cabinet where the same 3 or 4 pans get reached for, morning after morning, year after year. None of it looks dangerous. All of it is completely ordinary. That's exactly the point. And the organs I'm talking about are your kidneys. I want you to picture something for a moment. 2 fist-sized organs, sitting just below your rib cage, on either side of your spine. You've probably gone your entire life without thinking about them for more than a few seconds at a time. No one ever taught you to appreciate them the way you appreciate your heart, or your lungs, or your brain. And yet these 2 quiet, unglamorous organs are working, right now, as you listen to this, filtering waste out of your blood, balancing your electrolytes, regulating your blood pressure, activating vitamin D, controlling how much fluid your body holds onto. They do this without ever asking for a break. They do it while you sleep. They do it while you're stressed, while you're sick, while you forget they exist entirely. Here's the strange thing about kidney damage. It doesn't announce itself. There's no dramatic chest pain like a heart attack. There's no sudden collapse like a stroke. Your kidneys can lose up to 90% of their function before you feel anything unusual at all. 90%. Let that sit for a second. By the time most people notice symptoms, swelling in the ankles, fatigue that sleep doesn't fix, foamy urine, a dull ache in the lower back, a strange metallic taste that won't go away, the damage has often been building for years, sometimes decades, silently, patiently, while you were cooking dinner, reheating leftovers, or reaching for a painkiller you didn't think twice about. I want to walk you through this today, item by item, because I think once you see what's actually sitting in your kitchen, you're going to look at it differently. Not with panic. Panic doesn't help anyone, and it certainly doesn't help your kidneys, but with the kind of clear-eyed awareness that lets you make small changes that add up to years of protection for organs you cannot live without and cannot replace with a trip to the pharmacy. There is a reason kidney disease is sometimes called a silent epidemic. It affects a staggering number of adults worldwide, and a large percentage of them do not know it yet. Not because the warning signs don't exist, but because the warning signs, when they finally appear, look so much like ordinary tiredness, ordinary aging, and ordinary bad week that almost no one connects them to anything serious until a doctor runs a specific test and delivers a specific number. There is no over-the-counter kidney. There is no rush order for a new one. What you have is what you have, and the goal today is simple. Help you keep it working for as long as possible. Let's start at the bottom of the list and work our way up to the single most underestimated threat, sitting in almost every kitchen in the world. One that has nothing to do with a product on a shelf at all. And I want to say one more thing before we begin, because I think it matters. Nothing on this list is being presented to scare you into throwing your kitchen away. Every single item exists because it's useful. That's precisely why it ended up in your home in the first place. The goal isn't elimination. It's moderation, awareness, and knowing which habits deserve a second look. Keep that in mind as we go through this together. Number 13. The canned soups and canned vegetables stacked neatly in your pantry. Canned food feels safe. It feels shelf-stable, tested, regulated, boring in the best possible way. But 2 things are working against your kidneys inside almost every can. First, the sodium content of canned soups and vegetables is often shockingly high. A single serving can carry close to half of an entire day's recommended sodium intake, and most people eat more than a single serving without thinking twice. Second, many cans are still lined with epoxy resins that can contain bisphenol compounds, chemicals that can migrate into the food inside, especially when that food is acidic. Think canned tomatoes, canned beans and sauce, canned soups with a tomato base. Over years of regular consumption, this combination of high sodium load and chemical exposure adds a slow, steady weight onto kidneys that are already managing everything else on this list. Number 12. The unregulated supplements sitting on top of your refrigerator, the detox teas, the miracle weight loss capsules, the herbal blends promising to cleanse your body of toxins. Here's the uncomfortable truth. In most countries, dietary supplements are not required to prove their safety or effectiveness before they're sold. That means the bottle in your kitchen may contain exactly what the label says, or it may not. Investigations into supplement contamination have repeatedly found undisclosed pharmaceutical ingredients, heavy metals like lead and cadmium, and inconsistent dosing from batch to batch. Your kidneys are the organs tasked with filtering and clearing whatever ends up in your bloodstream, known or unknown. When you swallow a capsule with an ingredient list that isn't fully verified, you are asking your kidneys to process something that hasn't been vetted the way a prescription medication has. Add to this the specific and well-documented risk of megadosing on vitamin C, doses far beyond what your body needs, taken with the belief that more is always better, which can raise oxalate levels in the urine and directly contribute to the formation of painful kidney stones. Number 11. The salt shaker sitting on your table. I'm not going to stand here and tell you salt is poison. Your body needs sodium. It's essential for nerve function, muscle contraction, fluid balance. The problem isn't salt itself. The problem is volume, and the problem is how invisible that volume has become. The average person today consumes far more sodium than their kidneys were ever designed to process, and most of it isn't even coming from the shaker on the table. It's hidden in bread, in sauces, in canned soups, in deli meat, in things that don't even taste particularly salty. Your kidneys are the organs responsible for regulating how much sodium stays in your bloodstream. When you flood them with more than they can comfortably filter, day after day, year after year, they have to work harder to push the excess out. That extra workload raises blood pressure, and high blood pressure is, quietly, one of the two leading causes of kidney disease worldwide. Not an infection, not a virus. Just pressure, applied slowly, over years, through the tiny blood vessels inside your kidneys called nephrons, the actual filtering units, of which you have about 1 million in each kidney, and which do not regenerate once they're gone. Here's a comparison that tends to stick with people. Imagine a water filter in your home, the kind with a cartridge that traps sediment. Run a small amount of dirty water through it occasionally, and it lasts for years. Run it constantly, at maximum volume, day and night, and it clogs, degrades, and eventually fails, often earlier than anyone expected. Your kidneys' nephrons behave in a strikingly similar way. Chronic excess sodium is one of the fastest ways to push that filtration system toward premature wear. Number 10. Your non-stick pans. Think about the pan you used this morning to make eggs. Non-stick coatings became popular because they made cooking easier. Less oil, less scrubbing, less burnt-on mess. But many of these coatings were built using a class of chemicals known as PFAS, sometimes called forever chemicals, because they do not break down in the environment, or, more troublingly, in your body. When a non-stick pan is scratched, chipped, or overheated, and most home cooks overheat pans more often than they realize, especially when preheating an empty pan on high before adding oil, these compounds can leach into food. Once inside the body, PFAS compounds are processed and filtered largely by the kidneys, and research has linked long-term exposure to reduced kidney function and, in some studies, to elevated risk of kidney cancer. Your kidneys weren't built to filter synthetic compounds designed to survive nearly forever. They do their best. But every organ has a limit, and forever chemicals quite literally do not go away. And here's what makes this particular item feel almost unfair. You can't see it, smell it, or taste it happening. There's no burnt flavor to warn you a coating has broken down. The pan looks the same the day it starts leaching as it did the day you bought it. The only real warning sign is time and visible wear, scratches, peeling edges, a dull patchy surface where the coating used to be smooth and even. Number 9. The plastic containers stacked in your cabinet, the ones you use to store leftovers, to reheat lunch, to pack your kids' meals. Plastic seems inert, it seems safe, but under heat, under acidity, under repeated use, And scratching? Plastic sheds microscopic particles and chemical compounds, including phthalates and bisphenols, into whatever food or liquid it's holding. These compounds don't just pass through you unnoticed. Several studies have found associations between higher exposure to these chemicals and measurable changes in kidney function, particularly in people who microwave food directly in plastic containers, which dramatically increases the rate of chemical leaching. Even the simple act of pouring hot soup into a plastic container to cool it down faster is enough to accelerate this process. The kidneys are again the primary filtration point for many of these substances leaving your bloodstream. Every container you microwave is, in a small way, a chemistry experiment your kidneys have to clean up after. A simple test if you want to see this for yourself. Look at an old plastic container you've used for years. Notice the faint orange-red staining from tomato sauce that never fully washes out, or the slightly warped shape from repeated microwave use. That staining and warping isn't cosmetic. It's a visible sign that the plastic structure is breaking down, and every time it breaks down a little more, it releases a little more of itself into whatever you're storing inside it. Number 8. Energy drinks and heavily caffeinated beverages sitting in your refrigerator door. An occasional cup of coffee is not what we're talking about here. Moderate caffeine intake has actually been associated with some protective effects in several studies. What we're talking about is the modern habit of energy drinks. Massive caffeine loads combined with taurine, artificial sweeteners, and sometimes dangerous combinations of stimulants consumed multiple times a day, often on an empty stomach, often to compensate for chronic sleep deprivation. Cases of acute kidney injury following heavy energy drink consumption have been documented in emergency medicine literature, not as rare curiosities, but as a recognized and rising pattern, especially among younger adults who treat these drinks as a substitute for actual rest. The mechanism appears to involve a combination of dehydration, spikes in blood pressure, and direct stress on kidney tissue from extremely high caffeine concentrations hitting the body all at once, sometimes stacked 2 or 3 cans deep in a single afternoon. What makes this especially concerning is who tends to consume the most energy drinks, often teenagers and young adults, whose kidneys are otherwise perfectly healthy and who assume that youth itself is a form of protection. It isn't. A healthy young kidney can absolutely be injured by acute, extreme stress, even if it recovers afterward. The concern isn't necessarily one energy drink on an exam day. It's the pattern of daily reliance that quietly becomes normal. Number 7. Over-the-counter painkillers stored in your kitchen drawer, the ones you reach for without a second thought. This one surprises people the most, because these medications feel so ordinary. Ibuprofen, naproxen, the entire category of drugs known as NSAIDs. Used occasionally for a headache, a sore back, they are generally safe for people with healthy kidneys. But here is what almost nobody is told. These drugs work partly by narrowing certain blood vessels, including the ones that supply your kidneys. Used occasionally, your kidneys tolerate this without issue. Used frequently, daily, for chronic pain, for years, which is exactly how millions of people actually use them, especially people managing arthritis, chronic back pain, or recurring headaches without medical supervision, often for years at a stretch without ever revisiting whether the habit still makes sense. This narrowing effect becomes chronic. Blood flow to the kidneys drops, and over time this can lead to a condition doctors call analgesic nephropathy. It is one of the most common preventable causes of chronic kidney disease in the developed world, and it happens almost entirely because people don't realize a drug sitting next to their spice rack, sold without a prescription, has a real cost when taken habitually rather than occasionally. Consider the person managing chronic lower back pain who takes a couple of tablets every morning just to get through the day, for months, sometimes years, without ever mentioning it to a doctor, because it doesn't feel like a big enough issue to bring up. Multiply that by every joint ache, every headache, every monthly cramp treated the same way, year after year, and you start to see how a habit that feels completely reasonable in any single moment can add up to something much larger over time. Number 6. Sugary sodas and sweetened beverages. We already know sugar is linked to obesity and diabetes. That part isn't new information. But here's the piece that often gets missed. Diabetes is, globally, the single leading cause of kidney failure. Not an accident. Not a rare complication. The leading cause. High blood sugar damages the tiny blood vessels inside the kidneys the same way high blood pressure does, slowly, silently, over years, thickening and scarring the filtering structures until they simply stop working as well as they used to. And sugary drinks are uniquely efficient at driving the blood sugar spikes that, repeated daily, push people toward that diagnosis. Some research has also pointed to a more direct pathway, that high fructose intake specifically may raise uric acid levels and contribute to kidney stress independent of its effects on weight and blood sugar. Either way, the can of soda in your fridge is doing more than adding calories. It may be quietly shaping your risk of kidney disease decades before you ever get a diagnosis. What makes sugary drinks particularly deceptive is the speed of consumption. Eating an equivalent amount of sugar in solid food takes time, chewing, effort. Your body has a chance to register it. Drinking that same sugar dissolved in liquid takes seconds, bypasses most of that natural pacing, and delivers a much sharper spike to your bloodstream. A can of soda finished in under 2 minutes can deliver a blood sugar spike that your pancreas and, indirectly, your kidneys are left to manage for hours afterward. Number 5. Processed and deli meats. Beyond the sodium we already discussed, processed meats bring 2 additional problems to the table. First, phosphate additives, used as preservatives and texture enhancers, which are absorbed by the body far more efficiently than the natural phosphorus found in whole foods. Healthy kidneys can usually manage this extra phosphate load. But for kidneys that are already under stress, from age, from blood pressure, from any of the other items on this list working in combination, excess phosphate accumulates in the blood and has been linked to accelerated kidney decline and to increased calcification of blood vessels, which creates its own dangerous feedback loop with kidney health. Second, high intake of animal protein in general increases the filtration workload on the kidneys. This doesn't mean protein is bad, protein is essential, but a diet heavy in processed meat specifically, combined with everything else we've discussed, adds up in a way that's easy to underestimate one sandwich at a time. It's worth pointing out that the danger here isn't really about any single lunch. It's about the fact that processed meat has become a daily, almost automatic choice for a huge number of people. The same sandwich, the same cold cuts, the same quick dinner, repeated so consistently that it stops registering as a choice at all. The kidneys don't experience it as a series of separate meals. They experience it as one long, continuous workload. Number 4, artificial sweeteners marketed as the healthy alternative to sugar. This one tends to catch people off guard, because these products are often marketed directly at people trying to protect their health. Diabetics, dieters, anyone told to cut back on sugar. Some research, including large observational studies, has found associations between high consumption of artificially sweetened beverages and an increased risk of decline in kidney function over time, particularly in people who already have reduced kidney function or are at risk for it. The exact mechanism is still being studied and isn't fully settled, but the pattern showing up across multiple studies is enough that it deserves your attention, especially if you've been drinking diet soda under the assumption that it's the safe choice, or handing it to family members you're specifically trying to protect. This is often the most frustrating item on the entire list, because it involves people actively trying to do the right thing. Someone gets a diagnosis, is told to cut sugar, switches every sweetened product in the house to a diet or zero sugar alternative, and feels, understandably, like they've solved the problem. The uncomfortable truth is that the science here is still evolving, and until it's fully settled, treating these products as a neutral, unlimited substitute rather than an occasional alternative is worth reconsidering. Number 3, salt substitutes containing potassium chloride. Here's where good intentions can backfire in a way that almost nobody expects. As awareness of sodium's effects on blood pressure has grown, many people, often specifically people who've already been told to watch their blood pressure or kidney health, have switched to potassium-based salt substitutes, assuming they've solved the problem. And for someone with fully healthy kidneys, this can genuinely be a helpful swap. But healthy kidneys are precisely the ones who don't need to worry in the first place. For someone whose kidney function is already reduced, even mildly, even without knowing it, since remember, kidney decline is often silent, the kidneys lose their ability to efficiently clear excess potassium from the blood. An elevated potassium, a condition called hyperkalemia, doesn't just stress the kidneys further, it can directly and dangerously affect the electrical rhythm of the heart. This is a case where the healthier sounding swap can be more dangerous than the original problem, specifically for the population most likely to reach for it. Number 2. Protein powders and creatine, especially when used far beyond recommended amounts. This is one of the fastest growing categories in kitchens around the world, sitting in tubs next to the blender, scooped into shakes multiple times a day by people chasing a fitness goal. Use at reasonable doses, with adequate hydration. Protein supplementation is not inherently dangerous for someone with healthy kidneys, but two patterns show up again and again in people who run into trouble. First, stacking excessive protein intake, far beyond what the body can actually use for muscle repair, dramatically raises the filtration workload on the kidneys over the long term. Second, and less well known, is that creatine supplementation, while generally considered safe at standard doses for healthy individuals, has been associated with kidney injury in cases involving very high doses, dehydration, or use in people with pre-existing but undiagnosed kidney impairment. The pattern that tends to cause real harm isn't moderate use. It's the mindset of, if a little helps, more must help more, applied to a supplement industry with far less oversight than people assume. There is a particular version of this that shows up often in gyms and fitness communities. Someone hits a plateau, assumes the solution is simply more protein shakes, a bigger creatine dose, a second scoop instead of one, without increasing water intake to match. Creatine specifically requires adequate hydration to be processed properly, and doubling the dose without doubling attention to water intake is precisely the combination that shows up in documented cases of kidney strain. More is not a strategy. It's a shortcut that occasionally works and occasionally backfires, and you don't get to know in advance which outcome you'll get. And now, number 1, the single most underestimated risk in your entire kitchen, not a product on a shelf, but a habit almost everyone has: chronic, low-grade dehydration. Not the dramatic kind, not the kind where you're stranded in a desert, the quiet kind, the kind where you wake up and reach for coffee instead of water, where you go through a busy morning without a single glass of water, where the only fluids entering your body all day are caffeinated, sweetened, or both. Your kidneys depend on adequate fluid volume to do their job, filtering waste, balancing electrolytes, diluting the concentration of everything else on this list moving through your bloodstream. When you're chronically underhydrated, your kidneys have to work with less fluid to filter the same waste load, concentrating everything, including all the sodium, the phosphate additives, the medication residues, the sugar byproducts, the supplement compounds we've spent the last half hour discussing. Chronic mild dehydration doesn't cause a dramatic event. It's not going to send you to the emergency room. What it does is quietly amplify the damage from every single other item on this list, day after day, for years, until one day a routine blood test comes back with a number your doctor wants to talk about further. Think about how differently we treat visible injuries compared to invisible ones. If you cut your hand, you see it, you feel it, you treat it immediately. Chronic dehydration produces no cut, no bruise, no immediate sensation beyond a vague tiredness most people simply attribute to a busy schedule. That's exactly why it's so easy to live with for years without ever addressing it. There's no obvious signal telling you it's a problem worth solving today rather than someday. So why does all of this matter enough to spend this much time on it? Because kidney disease is one of the only major chronic illnesses that can progress from completely normal function to needing dialysis without a single dramatic warning sign along the way. There is no equivalent of chest pain. There is no equivalent of a seizure. Compare that for a moment to something like appendicitis, where pain builds specifically and unmistakably until you have no choice but to seek help. Kidney decline offers no such mercy. It simply reduces its own workload quietly, recruiting the tissue that remains to compensate for what's already been lost, for as long as it possibly can. The kidneys simply do less and less, quietly, efficiently compensating for their own decline for years, until compensation is no longer possible. By the time fatigue, swelling, or changes in urination become noticeable, a significant percentage of kidney function is often already gone, and unlike liver tissue, kidney tissue does not meaningfully regenerate. Dialysis, when it becomes necessary, is not a light commitment. It typically means multiple sessions a week, hours at a time, for the rest of a person's life, unless a transplant becomes possible. And transplants come with their own long waiting lists and lifelong medication requirements. None of that is meant to frighten you into paralysis. It's meant to explain why prevention, quiet and unglamorous as it is, matters so much more than treatment ever will. And prevention, in this case, really is unglamorous. It's not a dramatic lifestyle overhaul. It's not an expensive supplement or a trendy cleanse. In fact, as we've already discussed, some of those cleanses are part of the problem, not the solution. It's water. It's reading a label before you buy something. It's using a different pan. It's asking a simple question before reaching for a painkiller. Out of habit, have I taken this every day this week? These are small, almost boring adjustments. But boring, consistent habits are exactly what kidneys respond to over a lifetime, because kidneys don't experience your life in dramatic moments. They experience it as one long, continuous average of everything you do, meal after meal, day after day, year after year. But here is the part I actually want you to walk away with, because I don't want you leaving this feeling afraid. Fear doesn't protect anyone's kidneys. What protects your kidneys is awareness, translated into small, boring, repeatable habits. Drink water consistently throughout the day, not just when you feel thirsty. Thirst is already a lagging indicator of dehydration, not an early one. A simple habit that works for many people is keeping a water bottle visible at your desk or on your counter, refilling it at set points in the day, rather than waiting for a feeling that may not arrive until you're already behind. Read labels on processed and canned foods, specifically for sodium and phosphate additives, which are usually listed as ingredients with the word phosphate somewhere in them. Diphosphate, triphosphate, polyphosphate, all worth noticing. Replace non-stick cookware that's scratched or more than a few years old with stainless steel or cast iron, and avoid overheating non-stick pans on high heat, especially before adding any liquid or oil. Move food out of plastic containers before microwaving it, and avoid reusing scratched plastic containers for hot foods. Glass containers, while slightly less convenient, remove this risk almost entirely. Treat over-the-counter painkillers the way you'd treat any medication taken regularly, as something worth a conversation with a doctor if you're using them more than occasionally, rather than something automatically safe because it doesn't require a prescription. Be skeptical of unregulated supplements promising rapid results, and if you take vitamin C or any other supplement in high doses, understand that more is not automatically better and can, in the specific case of oxalates, work directly against you. Be cautious with potassium-based salt substitutes and with high-dose protein or creatine supplementation unless you know your kidney function is healthy, and if you don't know, a simple blood test can tell you. And get your kidney function checked periodically, even if you feel completely fine, because feeling fine is unfortunately exactly what kidney disease looks like for most of its course. A basic blood and urine test can catch changes years before you would ever feel them yourself. Two simple markers, creatinine and something called estimated glomerular filtration rate, often shortened to eGFR, are usually enough to give you a baseline. It costs very little, takes only a few minutes, and gives you information that no symptom, no matter how attentive you are to your body, could give you on its own. None of this requires you to overhaul your entire life overnight. It requires you to look at your kitchen, really look at it, and recognize that some of the most ordinary objects in it, the ones you've stopped even noticing because you use them every single day, are quietly shaping the health of two organs you will need for the rest of your life, and that modern medicine still cannot fully replace once they're gone. Somewhere between the salt shaker and the water bottle you may or may not have refilled today sits a version of your future health that is still, largely, within your control. Kidneys are patient organs. They tolerate an enormous amount of neglect before they finally show you the bill. But patience isn't the same as immunity, and the habits sitting quietly in your kitchen, the pan, the container, the drawer full of painkillers, the drink in your hand right now, are in their own small way votes you cast every single day for the kind of health you'll have 10, 20, 30 years from now. You walked into your kitchen this morning without thinking twice about any of this. I'd guess you won't do that again. There is a room in your house that you walk into